Hello and welcome to End Cancer. I'm Jackie McDonough, filling in for Adam Benini, and I'm joined here today by Shannon Traphagen. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, and I don't even know how to do a proper introduction for you because, like I was saying when we were walking up, there are so many things that you do. So just to rattle off a couple, Shannon is a podcast host for Game On Glio, which is a very successful podcast. She is an event founder of one of our Team Roswell events that lasted for several years, and she is a business owner. And all of those different projects play back into the mission to end cancer. But to start, I guess we'll start on a more human level on just what brings you to this cause and to Roswell Park.
Well, to the cause itself, it all goes back to my husband being diagnosed with brain cancer 5 years ago this month. Actually 6 years ago. He was diagnosed. 5 years ago, he passed away. And the work that was being done at Roswell in the brain cancer space specifically, as many people know, brain cancer is very rare. There are roughly 25,000 people within the U.S. diagnosed, roughly 600 people in Buffalo alone diagnosed, and that doesn't include pediatric brain cancer. And so when he was diagnosed, we spent a great deal of time here at Roswell. And we had some amazing doctors around us. We had an amazing neurosurgeon who was such a huge champion for Mike and for his healing and for the capability to get us across a certain threshold with brain cancer because he was only 44 when he was diagnosed. Unfortunately, he passed away. But the work that was being done in the clinical trial space and with genome testing for brain tumors, molecular testing, and a lot of the clinical trials that were taking place here at Roswell were really what drew me to the cause of getting more involved, becoming a patient advocate, helping others that are dealing with all kinds of rare cancers. And those clinical trials are crucial, and that was kind of where I decided to put my focus.
And I know just looking on your Instagram for Game On Glio, you have some really beautiful tributes to your husband. I just read, I think it was the poem you did about like the things you love most about him. Tell us a little bit about that. What do you want people to know about him outside of cancer?
Oh, you're going to make me cry. He was an amazing, amazing man. He was very humble and very giving. But we were together for 20 years. We met when we were in our early 20s, and so we grew up together, essentially, into adulthood. And it was a fairy tale. He was my soulmate, my best friend. We taught each other a lot. And one of the things that was such a huge staple for both of us was giving back to our community. We both volunteered. We both loved being a part of the community. We both used to ride for Roswell, for the Ride for Roswell. We would do it every single year. We actually did the Ride for Roswell the year he was diagnosed, right before he was diagnosed, without realizing that was coming. And he just had this way about him of making everybody believe the best in themselves. He just was that kind of person. And I always used to brag about his intelligence because he was Sheldon without all the quirks. He was a true engineer, but he was brilliant, but also really good looking and really outgoing and very sociable and very empathetic. So, that was something that he taught me a lot when he passed. The things that he taught me just on how to be in life are the things that I've carried with me. And I think that's what I would want people to know is that he instilled those things in me, and I will never forget that.
And I feel like you've done everything you can to carry on the things that you've learned from him. And just from a quick scan of the projects that you've worked on and the connections that you've made with people, that's very easy to see. And so bring us up to speed with, he turns 44.
Yeah.
Tell us about his cancer diagnosis.
It was August of 2019. Ironically, it was such a weird space of time because I had actually just published my first fiction novel, which was a lifelong goal and something. I'm a storyteller by nature. That is just in me, and I always wanted to be an author. And I finally had this opportunity and got published. And the book had just come out, and I was getting ready to do a bunch of book signings, and things were kind of picking up speed. And we were actually on the course to adopt. We had suffered a number of miscarriages over a span of 5 or 6 years, and so we spent about 2.5 years on a waiting list. And for people who don't understand the adoption process, it's grueling. It takes a lot of patience, and we finally got chosen by a mother down in Florida, and we went through the entire pregnancy with her. So we were so excited to be on that journey. And then in August of 2019, there was a span of 2 weeks where he was just feeling off. And so he wasn't having typical symptoms that you would normally see with brain cancer or brain tumors, where there are seizures or ringing in the ears or halos in the eyes or loss of movement on one side of the body. He wasn't dealing with any of that. The majority of what it was brain fog and heavy anxiety. And it got to the point, we thought it was just, we had a lot going on. We had a baby on the way. He had a promotion at work coming. And so I just thought, we have a lot going on. We were planning the baby shower. We were kind of in the thick of it. And so Sunday night came around, and I will never forget it because, ironically, it ended up being on my parents' wedding anniversary. I said, why don't you sit down, make a list of your symptoms, what you've been feeling for the last couple of weeks, and we'll go to your primary tomorrow, and we'll just see what's going on. And he said, okay. And he started making a list, and then all of a sudden he started to struggle writing the letter C. And I thought he was having a transient stroke. Like, I thought maybe he'd had some kind of stroke, which, in all honesty, I wish it had been. And so that's when I said, look, we're going to go over to urgent care. We'll go over to urgent care. We'll have him do a quick run through, and we'll make sure everything's okay. And we did. He passed all baselines. He passed all the neurological tests. And the lady looked at us, and she said, the only other thing you can do is go over to Buffalo General and ask for a CAT scan or an MRI. And I looked at him, and I just said, what do you want to do? And he grabbed my hand. He goes, I don't know. What do you think? And I said, let's get it done. And he said, okay. And so we went over to Buff Gen, and I am really good friends with the chair of the neurosurgery department, Dr. Elad Levy. He and I are very, very good friends. He happened to be out of town for a conference, but we had the testing done. It was midnight, and we're waiting. And I finally get out to the nurse's station, and I said, it's midnight. We're starving. The dogs need to be let out. What's going on? And she's like, we're just waiting for somebody to come down and talk to you. Wow. And that's when I got this sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. And that's when a resident came in and just said, we see a huge mass on your left parietal lobe and your frontal parietal lobe. And so we're going to do brain surgery. Wow. And he kind of looked at me, and at that point, Mike was starting to, the symptoms, it was almost like the tumor knew it was about to be found, because his symptoms started coming on pretty fast. And I don't know if it was the stress that, was triggering it, but he was starting to forget a few things. He was getting confused. And I looked at the resident, I said, what's going on? What are we dealing with? And he blurted out the word glioblastoma. And it's not a word that I had ever really paid attention to before. And I kind of looked at him and I said, what does that mean? What are we talking about here? And he goes, think Beau Biden and John McCain. Wow. And that was when I walked out of the room, grabbed my phone, called Dr. Levy, and I said, you need to get back here now. Because if you don't do the surgery, we're going somewhere else.
And that's how fast it happened?
That's how fast it happened. Yep. Within that time frame. And our lives changed irrevocably after that. And from then on, it was radiation, chemotherapy, figuring out if we could, Survaxum, which is actually a clinical trial offered through Mimivax and Roswell, which is a clinical trial that I wholeheartedly support right now, and I've been paying very close attention to the data coming in. They had just kickstarted the phase 1 trial, and we missed it by 3 days. They had just closed phase 1, and they were collecting the data to get ready for phase 2. And so we had just missed it. Otherwise, we would have tried the trial. So that was kind of how everything snowballed. And, we ended up with a couple of amazing doctors here at Roswell that were they were young. It impacted them because they were witnessing, you're our age, and we're watching you guys go through this. And unfortunately with Mike, and this is on top of brain cancer being as rare as it is, he ended up developing, he was good for roughly 12, 13 months. And I can't stress this enough, people really need to know how to advocate for themselves and advocate for their loved ones. Don't be afraid of white coat syndrome and the doctors having all the answers, because you are one of one, where for them, you are one of 3, 4, 5, 600 that are being treated. And something had changed with Mike. And we couldn't figure out what it was, but he was losing body mass, he was losing weight, he was throwing up. And the oncologist we had been with was saying, it's just chemo anxiety, he's just stressed. And I'm like, no, something's different, something changed. And he's like, well, his MRI scan is normal. They were putting him on a pedestal. We really thought he'd be the 5-year mark. And so I said no, and I called Dr. Levy. I said, I'm bringing him in. And they did a spinal tap. And unfortunately, he ended up developing leptomeningeal spread, which is 0.01% of glioblastoma patients. And within 2 months after that, he was gone.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear about how quickly things progressed and just what you guys had to deal with at such a young age. And I feel like even as you tell that story, it's so clear the partnership you had in your marriage, because I feel like a lot of couples wouldn't sit together and make a list of all the symptoms. And the fact that you were able to advocate for him at every step, I feel like really speaks to how special your relationship was. And I know you have worked for the last several years to really make sure that Mike is not forgotten and to advocate for other people like him. Tell us about your Team Roswell event and how that got started.
That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. So I knew within the year after that first anniversary, I knew that I wanted to do something, that I needed to find purpose in the pain, and that I needed to find a way to move through this, because I was only 43. And the first thing I thought of was, okay, how can I help support brain cancer trials at Roswell? How can I support the clinical trials going on in our local community? But I want to do it differently than traditional fundraising opportunities. And so the first thing I turned to was, what am I passionate about? What was Mike passionate about? Cycling. I'm a road cyclist. I'm out on my bike all the time. He was a huge cyclist. And so I said, I can honor him. Ride for Roswell, such a huge, successful event for Roswell Park. How can I contribute to that? And so Traphagen's Trail Ride for Brain Cancer kind of evolved from that. And we started working with the Roswell Park Foundation. And we teamed up with them because my company is an LLC and not a nonprofit. So we said, well, what's the easiest way people can donate? Well, we'll link with Roswell and we'll create a page. And that way, when people raise the funds and they donate, it will automatically go right to brain cancer clinical trials at Roswell, which is exactly where we wanted it to go. And we did it for 4 years. We decided I mapped out all these routes out in Hamburg, New York, because I love Hamburg, and the Boston Hills are a great, safe area to ride. And so we mapped out a large route and then a smaller route, and then we had a walking route for people who wanted to just walk around the village. We had Chevettas would come out at the end. We had a park that everybody would gather at, and we'd all meet afterward, and I'd give a small speech. Chevettas offered a bunch of food and would bring it out, and we'd have great food to eat after the fact. And for 4 years, we raised about $85,000 for brain cancer clinical trials.
And I think when you talk about the timing of how everything played out with your husband, one thing we try to stress to people when they're talking about making a donation is there is this urgency, because it does come down to like seconds, minutes, days when people are dealing with a cancer diagnosis. And knowing that in his memory you've been able to raise $85,000 for clinical trials like the one that he almost got on, what does that feel like? Do you take time to reflect on that?
I do, and ironically, I'm really hard on myself because I don't think it's enough. 85,000 sounds impressive, but I know how much these clinical trials cost. I know how much it costs just to treat one patient in a clinical trial. And it's expensive. It's so expensive. And, our economy right now is dealing with a lot when it comes to, for some reason, cancer care is getting kicked in the teeth. And there's a lot of funding that's being pulled back from cancer care, and we can't let that happen. There's been so many strides and so much movement being made in rare cancer. And the clinical trials, just in the last 5 years, what we have now for brain cancer care and some different treatment options wasn't even available 5 years ago. That's how far we've advanced. But clinical trials, it takes a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of lab work. Just to do in-human clinical trials is very expensive. So part of me is so grateful that I've been able to do that. And the other part of me is like, okay, what else can we do? Because it's not enough. We need more. And you're right, it's a ticking time bomb for so many patients, whether it is pancreatic cancer, whether it's brain cancer, pediatric, leukemia, colon cancer. There are some cancers that are just so hard to treat. And there are so many amazing clinical trials out there that people aren't aware of. But how do we get those into patients' hands? And that's kind of where my mind goes. So I'm tough on myself when it comes to what else can we do.
Yeah. And you can tell that that's your mindset by how much you have accomplished. And I think the fact that you did 85,000 is certainly something to be so proud of. And I feel like exactly what you explained of tying your passion of cycling to the cancer cause is what we really try to promote with Team Roswell. So what would you say to someone who's listening to this who wants to give back to Roswell Park, wants to get involved in the Mission to End Cancer, has a passion that they could possibly tie to this cause? What would your message be to them about starting their own unique fundraiser?
Fundraising can be daunting, but it's not impossible and it's not scary. You don't have to be a nonprofit or start a nonprofit in order to raise funds to give back to Roswell. And that was a hurdle that I had that I thought would be impossible to do. I said, how are we going to do this if I'm not a nonprofit? I'm like, but I'm not sure if that's the step I want to take yet. And Roswell was amazing. Candace and I even met and got together at the start of this. And I said, she goes, well, let's just link it. Let's just, all we have to do is we'll create a page for Roswell. We'll connect Roswell to you guys. And then the funds are going directly where they need to go. And the other thing that people need to understand, too, is that you can either just openly raise funds for Roswell as a whole, or if you're really passionate about a specific cancer, you can have the funds directed into any clinical trials or care that is going on within that funnel of cancer diagnosis. And that's a really special thing. And sometimes cancer centers don't allow for that, but Roswell does. You can really dictate how you want your fundraiser to look. And it makes it better when you take something you're passionate about and create a fundraiser around that, because it'll be more successful when it's done that way instead of doing something that somebody else has done. Do it your way.
What do you think your family and your late husband would have thought had they known that in that short amount of time you were able to raise that much money in his honor, not just for cancer research and not just for Roswell Park, but specifically for the clinical trials that are helping people who face the same type of diagnosis that he did?
I can hear my husband's words. I think he would be sitting there saying, I'm not surprised. when Shannon wants something, she goes after it. And I think that's what he would say. And I think he'd be really proud of everything that we're doing. Yeah.
Let's say someone's watching who they or their partner just got diagnosed with cancer. What would your message be to them?
Oh, it's a whirlwind in those first 12 hours. And if somebody out there is just getting that news, the best thing you can do is hold each other's hand, take a deep breath, and trust that you will not walk through this process alone, as overwhelming as it is. And do not go to WebMD or Google. Do not, as tempting as it is, don't go there. The biggest thing you can do is wrap yourself around hope that there are some answers, that there are teams and people out there that are working on finding better treatments, and know that you have the power to ask questions. You have the power within you to say, we want to know more about this, or what if we want information on this, or we think we may have seen a clinical trial, we want to look into that. You have power and control within the disease, and don't let the disease define you or scare you.
So Shannon, 5 years since Mike passed, obviously in those last 5 years you've done so many different initiatives to try to carry on his legacy and raise funds for cancer research and help other patients. Do you still feel that obligation to carry this on?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if that will ever change. Once you become a widow or a widower, once you are so personally impacted by cancer in this way, it changes you and the course of your life forever. And the hope is that it changes you in a good way, that you're able to find a way to turn your grief into a powerful purpose. And so I don't see the course that I'm on changing. I feel a need to keep going and to continue to reach out and to help others. And I do it for him, but I do it for the patient that is being diagnosed right this second. I do it for the pediatric patient that is being diagnosed with brain cancer that may not make it to adulthood. I do it for the caregivers and the widows and the widowers that are out there. And I do it for all the cancer centers that are fighting really hard for funding right now. It's a lot of loss. And there are a lot of people out there that are suffering. And I think that gets to me. And if there's anything that I can do to help those people in the small platform that I have, that's impactful for me. And it's meaningful to want to help as many people as I can, because cancer it can be scary when you're diagnosed with it. And my heart it's connected to all of these people that are walking this journey or that have lost somebody in this fight. And honestly, my heart is with the cancer centers like Roswell and the surgeons and the doctors that they try so hard and they want to do so much for their patients. And sometimes there's only so much that you can do. And I see that, and I know how much they care, which is why it's important to tell their stories as well, because they care just as much. And so, there's something about it that just is, I don't think Mike would want me to do it any differently. I think that I can feel him by my side as I walk this journey, and I think this is where he would want me to be.
That's the perfect way to summarize it.
Yeah.
Was there anything I didn't ask you think is important you wanted to mention?
No, this was a beautiful conversation. I think my only message to everybody is that you are not alone. Whether you live here in Buffalo we are a community where we have each other's backs, or if you live somewhere else nationally or globally, you are not alone in this journey. And there are people like me and like you and others out there who we are with you every step of the way. And I'm easy to find, and I will absolutely, if you DM me, I will answer you and I will help you and I will walk through this journey with you. But I don't want people to feel like they're alone if they're walking through this journey, because they're not alone. And we will do everything we can to help them.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Shannon. And thank you for listening to End Cancer.